In this video, I want to introduce you to really the only wood finish, the only clear wood finish that any beginner needs. It's simple, it's inexpensive, it's pretty durable, super easy to go on, does not need a specially clean place to apply it, and it just works well. I've been using it for years. It's Minwax Wipe-On Poly. This is not a sponsorship. I'm not being paid to talk about this. It's just really good stuff. And I'm going to show you how to use it. So as the name suggests, you wipe it on and wipe it off, or that's the theory anyway. What I like to do is start with a little pie dish like this. It's quite a thin viscosity liquid. And well, before I get into this, let me tell you, there's two drawbacks to this kind of finish. Now, if you find this information useful, leaving a like down below helps the channel a ton. And if you want to get the best in DIY, woodworking, home improvement, and modern self-reliance content every single week, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Everything has a drawback. The two here are not very serious, but you should know about them. One is that it takes a fair number of coats to deliver meaningful coverage. So I would say at least 3. You're not going to want to bother putting on any less than 3 if you really want to protect the wood. I have seen situations where 10 coats have been applied, and that was this super smooth, almost sealed in glass kind of look. So you can do that with this product, although it's a little troublesome to take it that far. So that's drawback number 1. You're going to have to repeat this process a few times. Drawback number 2 is that the level of protection, unless you go with a crazy number of coats, is not all that great. So I wouldn't use it, for instance, in a place that's, kitchen cabinets, for instance, where there's water and grease and dirt and things like that. But lots of other things. All interior, by the way. This is not an exterior finish. This is an interior finish. It seals well, and it provides what I consider a moderate amount of protection. So, although it's called Wipe-On Poly, I actually prefer to brush it on. And it's not so much of a big deal with a flat piece of wood. This is a piece of cherry, and it's just a scrap from my wood rack. And it's flat, so there's no problem just using a disposable rag and dipping it in the liquid and wiping it on. But in the real world, wooden items have corners, inside corners, moldings, little nooks and crannies and things, and it can be hard to get a wet rag into those little depressions and nooks and crannies, and that's where the paintbrush comes in, because you can get very easily in those areas. And so I'm going to use the paintbrush here, even though I don't really need to. The first thing to understand is you want to flood the wood with this liquid, and you want to keep it flooded for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, because the idea here is that most of this finish is going to soak in. There will be a surface layer building up in time, and I'll get to that, and I'll show you how you can know for sure whether it's time for a second coat and a third coat and a fourth coat, because that's a pretty important decision to make. But for now, we're just going to put this stuff on. Now, I've cleaned this piece of wood, and this cart that I'm working on here is clean also, but you don't need to be surgically clean, because there's wiping involved in the process, and that goes a long way to eliminating the problems that a little bit of settled dust might have caused. But that's about it. Now, technically, I'm going to wipe this off, but I'm not going to wipe it off yet, because the wood takes time to soak in this liquid, and it will also soak in at different rates at different parts of the board. So if you come over here, for instance, actually you can start to see it now. Just come over here, and with the light reflecting off the wet area, you can see that here and here and here it's still wet, but there's dry zones. There's a dry zone there, 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 there. That's where the wood was thirstier. So we want to give that more liquid. My procedure is always a few minutes after I put on the wipe on poly, I go over it again, because some areas have more than they can drink and other areas don't have enough. So I'll do this a few times until the thirsty areas just don't seem so thirsty anymore. It may be, put it on, walk away for 10 minutes, come back, see what it looks like, brush it again, walk away for 10 minutes, come back, brush it. That sort of process will help you to get the most amount of absorption, which is what you want. So I'll just give it another shot here. Now, if I was finishing this piece of wood for real, it was part of a project that I cared about, I wouldn't be wiping it as fast as I am now, or as soon as I am now. I would let it soak in more, but we don't need to do that for the video. Just imagine it's fully saturated, the thirst is fully slaked, and now I want to wipe. And essentially I just, with what I would say is moderate pressure, wipe off all the liquid from the surface. And I don't want to go crazy and make it completely dry, but then again I don't want to have any liquid on the surface either, because this is not your standard film forming finish. If I just let that sit there and dry as it is without wiping, the results wouldn't be very good. So this finish is meant to be wiped, and the wiping is pretty easily. You just, as I said, with moderate pressure, take off everything that hasn't soaked in after that initial period. And as a final step, don't just rub like this, because there's going to be some little bit of residue left in a less than ideal way. So as your final wiping steps, just back and forth, continuous strokes. Now that's it for now. So what's the biggest problem you come up against when finishing wood? Let me know in the comments, and keep an eye out. I've got something exciting coming soon for DIYers that you won't want to miss. Plus, I'm going to be giving away a DeWalt cordless compact drill driver in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you've subscribed and turn on those notifications so you don't miss anything. What you're going to have to do next is wait for this to fully dry. And that's really important. And finish manufacturers don't always do the best job on their instructions, and this is one place. From a marketing point of view, they want to be able to say, dries in 2 hours or whatever. I'm not saying this stuff is supposed to, but quick drying time is seen as a marketing advantage. But the problem is that that can greatly reduce the quality of your outcome. And in a case like this, say in, 8-10 hours, I'd come here and I look at it and I touch it with my hand. Oh, it feels dry. I think it's time for a second coat. But that would be a mistake, because you don't want to feel the surface to see whether it's dry, because don't forget, most of the liquid is soaked below the surface. There's not really any liquid, even if it wasn't dry, for you to feel, because it's worked into the pores of the wood. So this cloth, this shop towel that you used for the initial wiping, this is the thing that tells you when it's time for a second coat. And it can take almost a day for it to dry hard. If I was using an oil product right now, like one of my favorite oil finishing products, great for kitchen tables and stuff, that can take 3 or 4 or 5 days for each coat to dry. So now that's not the case here, but it's very important that the coat you've applied has dried, so that when you add more, it's not just mixing with the stuff that's wet and you're wiping it all off again. You want this first coat to dry and then the second coat to be fully dry before you put on any subsequent coats. They have to be fully dry. Otherwise, you're not going to build anything. You're just going over the same thing and not actually accomplishing anything, not making any gains as far as building a finish that's going to serve the wood properly. So set this aside. Never crumple up stuff like this, because in rare cases, certain solvents and oils and things can actually spontaneously combust. They can start on fire on their own. So you just leave it open like that, and then you see, is the wet part of this shop towel stiff now? Is it stiff? Has the product dried? And if it has, then great. You're ready for another coat, another wiping down, another waiting for it to dry, and then continuing on from there until you have the level of protection that you want. Now, this is cherry, one of my favorite woods. It has darkened a little bit, as you'd expect, with the application of this finish. But the nice thing about cherry is that it continues to react to light, especially sunlight, but not just exclusively sunlight, to get darker and darker and darker. So, for instance, in the window frame you see here, it's made of solid cherry, and that's the fully rich cherry color. It works beautifully, and it's been finished with this product. So that's what you can expect when you're working with cherry, but it can be used in all kinds of woods. And it's simple. It's just about impossible to make a mistake. And I've pointed out all of the possibilities for error here. So as you can see, it's simple. You can do it in your garage, in your basement. You don't need a spray booth that's surgically clean or anything like that. Now I will mention one other thing before we finish up. When this is fully dry, the wood will feel less smooth than it did when you started. And the reason for that is something called raised grain. The grain has been raised. So on a microscopic level, when you sanded this wood, there were some wood fibers that were lying down flat. The sandpaper did cut off some fibers to make it smooth, but not all the fibers are cut off. Some of them are lying flat and you can't feel them. But when a liquid is applied and those fibers start to absorb the water, they're going to stand up. And then when the finish is hard, they're standing up in a rigid position. So it's very normal for you to feel the wood after this, especially the first coat has dried, and you think, man, that doesn't feel silky smooth like it did before. What's going on? Well, that's raised grain, and you need to very lightly sand it just by hand using 240 grit sandpaper. Just knock off all those little fibers that are standing up straight. Wipe it, or ideally vacuum the surface clean, and then apply the second coat. That's not going to raise the grain nearly as much, but it probably will be a little raised. So then you want to, when it's dry, do the sanding thing again, cleaning it. Third coat, anything after the third coat is probably not going to have any raised grain anymore, so you can just keep building the finish until you have something that's sealed and has an appropriate amount of protection for your application. This particular version is a satin finish, which means that it's almost not shiny at all. That's the kind I prefer. It does come in a gloss finish, which I don't like as much. Gloss finishes, unless they're obtained by buffing the surface afterwards, gloss finishes usually highlight imperfections, and I just don't really like the look of them. I've been working on a project myself recently, but not a woodworking one. My goal is to build the new gold standard of DIY learning, and it's going live on March the 1st. To celebrate, I'm giving away a DeWalt cordless drill driver, so make sure you're subscribed to get notified as soon as it goes live. This is something I've never seen before, and you're not going to want to miss it.